Yeah, you know, they call this stuff props, right? You know, something different. So it looked like we are looking and studying and being serious and all this other things. I see a lot of guys with blogs. They have fancy opening, fancy thumbnails of this, that, and the other thing. I haven't quite figured out exactly, you know, all the tricks of doing this stuff. I suppose I could be borrowing and cut paste and stuff from the internet and from books and things like that to make my fancy covering open thumbnails. And who knows, maybe I'll give a stab at it. But anyway, recently we watched or read something in the RPG Brigade's Facebook forum, or it might have been the tabletop gaming forum. I'm not sure, but from a fellow named Colin Wilson, under his Method James blog wordpro.com, MEPHIT James blog wordpros.com. It talked about don't go adventuring in D20. And what I think what he and his references was what are most PCs but a group of mercenaries or treasure hunters going out to make a book make their treasure or make their way in the world and make their fortune and fame, basically, you know, no rhyme or reason or what for. And that's true. That's in a way. I mean, I never looked at it that way as the concept that they're mercenaries, and I argue that a little bit because they're not exactly in hire by a third party. All the depend on your adventure, I guess, but they're not being brought together as by some third party to go achieve something or gain something for payola. Well, but that is a common thing. Well, that does happen quite a bit. And these independent rogues and lone wolf types and stuff that go out there and rabble the countryside doing what they do. What he was referring to is having a game where your whole campaign concept is something more focused. What if your group of PCs work for the city watch and or their job is to protect the city from interior and exterior threats? So you have a very small sandbox, if you will, with lots of variety and options in there. But their goals is not about treasure and loot. It's about protecting and defending, investigating those things. They have a job. They're working. They're working for a living. This justifies why this eclectic group of individuals gets put together, and they don't have to go into some great background stories to while Fred, Joe, and Micro Flash the Wiz all got together to go kill bad guys. So that's there's some concepts and some worthy concepts of considering in that. Um, and you have to ask yourself, is that true? Is that how we do things? Is that how we perceive, see this stuff as this group of individuals basically sell swords, mercenary types going around doing what they do for pay, and as opposed to having more substance in your campaign or your game world. I've repeatedly said, I'm 51 years old. I've been playing since I was 10, so I got 40 plus years of doing this stuff. And I'm telling you, I've ran hundreds of campaigns over my life, and I've had a few that also involved the local defenders or the local people banding a group together to go to fight some evil or to right some wrong or to fix a problem. And a lot of times from there, the players just go out and keep right on going. And once they've solved the problem, they just decide, hey, I like this lifestyle, and they're no longer working for the city, and they become the roving mercenary types that old Colin here is referring to. Mm. Gotta love Iowa in the summertime. The damn humidity here is terrible. Anyhow, the we talk about topics and themes quite a bit about what's interesting, what's not interesting. How do you play a game concept? So we're not doing the typical dungeon crawl or the typical bar crawl or the typical mercenary raider type thing. Uh, I can think right off the top of my head, the last 5 years, I ran a campaign where the gist was we wanted one that was dealing with horses and riding because that's a skill set a lot of people take for granted. Having been raised on a farm with horses, my mother was a huge horse nut and used to show and all that other stuff. I'm quite familiar with this topic. The gist of that particular campaign was instead of having, it wasn't some group of strangers that got together to go do something. A neighboring country, if you will, eradicated the majority of the elder members and male members of a horse clan, and the young fellow who was the young up and coming would-be leader had to rally his people, and with a handful of loyal retainers and hangers-on, set out to right the wrongs and to rebuild his clan in the eyes of their fellow clans, and to get revenge on the city folk who put them in that spot in the first place. And that ran on for about five months until somehow, sadly enough, it ended when a pair of rocks came. They were traveling through a canyon, and a pair of rocks swooped down, lashed onto the young leader and one of his key NPCs, or his key supporters, and flew off with them. And they weren't able to get themselves free. And the rest of the group just said, "C'est la vie." We didn't feel like they wanted to chase the rocks, hunt the rocks down, and try to free them from the soon-to-be feeding frenzy that would become their former leaders, existence. So there you go. There's the one campaign that I ran that did not involve a bunch of nobodies or individuals getting together to go hunt for treasure. In fact, there was very little treasure involved in that particular campaign. Another one that I did shortly after that was Two Dwarves in a Wagon. I refer that one quite a lot because it's one of those where I only had two players, and there's challenges when you only have two players or one player to find a really good campaign that keeps everybody engaged. Ideally, we'd had more players come along, but we weren't in a situation where we could get too many invites, and most of the people we knew stuck their noses up at it. So the two guys, they actually got into it real well. And in those campaign, the premise there was these two young dwarves had to find a job, so they got hired on basically as a driver and a guard on a wagon, and their job was to carry. They were teamsters to carry freight from the main citadel to these outlying mines and outposts and stuff. And I created a localized map, and they basically went up and came back, and along the way they ran into some competition by a fellow set of teamsters who kept trying to sabotage them, and then they got into doing the reverse to them. And then there was a bogle that kept tormenting one of them every time they drove through this bogle's territory, and there was a group of they're called flowers. They're a type of sprite or fairy, and that was also quite amusing. The advantage there, of course, was that they weren't in it for the loot. They weren't in it for the money. They were in it for the high adventure and the job. Because they're dwarves. The dwarves, I took on this job. I'm going to see this job through. I have to carry the wagon on my back. And of course, at some point, they progressed to where they saved up enough of their money and got enough doodads to parlay that into a wagon of their own, and then they become more competitive with their former employer and their competitors. So that one lasted 6 months, and then one of the two players he left. He had to basically he moved, and that was that. We're down to one guy, and God bless you, Medley, but you know what? You've got alpha types, and you got beta types, and you got a couple Charlie types, and Medley is a great follower, but not so hot when he's got to make all the decisions. And so we tried to run a campaign, and it kind of petered out, mostly because he was going, so what I'm going to do, and I wasn't going to be the NPC to lead him around. Kind of defeats the purpose if you're the GM and the playing to encourage the other player to do his part. Learn some stuff from that as a challenge. Always say you always learn something new if you let yourself expand and open your mind to it. That's a good thing to know as a GM. Is we all have a quirk, we all have our style, if you will, but at some point, we need to break from that. We need to try working things from outside a box perspective, because it's a good way to grow and to learn new skill sets and to experience things. We don't know what works or don't work until we have some fails. And you don't have some fails, you win at everything. Well, then how do you learn to appreciate what does work? You don't see it. That's just my opinion. Don't go adventuring in D20. I don't think it's D20, D100, D10. Bob's your uncle. Don't go adventuring. Well, yeah, 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 I have to agree, Colin. You can go and have some great gaming that doesn't involve the traditional adventuring, you know, spiel. Something, you know, just my 2 cents worth, my rant, my rave. And hey, I hope you all have yourself a good day. And until the next time, you know, keep your hat on.